What I think is going to happen to the European economy, do you think it'll fight inflation? No, I don't think so because they're in the same position as the US economy, where they're over 100% debt to GDP, maybe not Germany, most countries there. And if I'm not, at least in the South, maybe not in the North, I haven't looked at the numbers, but they're I don't know how that one resolves itself, honestly, because of just the massive discrepancy between the South and the North as far as their uh, fiscal policy. But once a country gets above 100% debt to GDP, they're screwed. They're done. It's game over. Game over. Lynn points out this study going back to 1800 where they analyzed 50 different countries that got to over 100% debt to GDP. Or excuse me, 51 countries. I say 50, it was 51 countries. And 50 out of those 51 defaulted, either through an honest default or a dishonest default via financial repression and inflation. So the US is at 120 right now. You say, hey, George, well, they were at 120 at World War II. Yeah. So how'd they get out of that? Financial repression. You just cap rates and you let inflation run hot. You have negative real yields. And you basically steal from the bondholders and the savers, the people who have made prudent decisions, the people who did the right thing, the people who produced more than they consumed. You steal from them. It's either that or you just tell your creditors to pound sand. And usually that only happens when the debt is denominated in a currency the government cannot print. And so the conclusion of Lynn's post, which I would suggest all of you guys read at lynnalden.com, is don't hold bonds because the United States only has one way out. That's through inflation and financial repression. Long term, see, this is where it gets tricky. Because over the short term, you look at the yield curve flattening. Yield curve flattening means high probability that of an economic contraction, economic activity going down, not up. So how do you get to financial repression, potentially even nominal GDP going down, especially we have an inversion of the curve, we get a recession, by definition is at least real GDP going down. And so how do you inflate your way out of that? It's I could very easily describe a doom vortex right now for the US economy, that's for sure. But that's why we go back to that Lenin quote, and I think we're going to see decades happen in this year for sure. So it's going to be an exciting time for macro. But going back to your question here, the European economy, I think they'll try. Do you think they'll try to fight inflation? Mm, I think they'll try to maybe raise rates a little bit. They don't have the stock market there that we have in the States. Um, I think they're just going to try this, the Ray Dalio beautiful deleveraging and just pray that they can just raise rates a little bit to get inflation down, but yet still have negative real rates to try to work that debt to GDP down a little bit. I think they'll try to do the same thing. Now, whether they can stick the landing or not is a completely different question. I think that's going to be their objective.